I was running, lungs burning, feet pounding against the damp forest floor. The storm had passed hours ago, leaving the air thick with the scent of wet earth. But the wind still howled through the trees, twisting branches into eerie silhouettes under the moonlight. My heart slammed against my ribs as I pushed forward, following the desperate sound that had jolted me awake. A scream. Faint. Weak. Someone was out there. Alone. I lived on the outskirts of this forest, in a shack barely holding itself together. Life had been cruel, forcing me to scrape by with odd jobs in the nearby town. But tonight, survival wasn't the first thing on my mind. Someone needed help, and I wasn't the kind of person to turn away. I stumbled through the undergrowth, my hands scratched raw by the thorns. Then I saw him, a boy, barely older than me. He was crumpled at the base of a tree, shivering violently. His clothes, ripped and filthy, were once expensive. His face, bruised and bloodied, told me he had been through something terrible. He looked up at me, his pale lips parting as if to speak, but only a broken whisper came out. "Help me." I knelt beside him, my fingers trembling as I checked for injuries. His forehead was burning up, his breath shallow. He was in bad shape. "You're safe," I assured him. "Can you move?" He barely responded, only managing a weak shake of his head. I had no choice. I wasn't strong, but I wasn't leaving him here. I slipped my arms beneath his and pulled with everything I had. He groaned, his weight nearly knocking me over. "Come on," I gritted out, forcing myself to drag him toward my home. "Stay awake." He mumbled something incoherent, his head lolling against my shoulder. Who was he? And how had he ended up in this godforsaken forest? The fire flickered inside my tiny shack, casting long shadows against the wooden walls. I had managed to get him onto my bed, stripping away his soaked clothes and wrapping him in blankets. His fever had worsened. I pressed a damp cloth to his forehead, my chest tightening. Then suddenly, his eyes fluttered open. "Where am I?" His voice was hoarse, fragile. "Safe," I answered. "Do you remember what happened?" He swallowed hard, confusion clouding his gaze. I don't know. No name. No memory." I studied him, noting the bruises along his arms. Someone had hurt him. Badly. I knew one thing for certain. Whoever had left him out there hadn't meant for him to come back alive. For days, he remained in and out of consciousness, haunted by feverish dreams. I tended to him, forcing him to drink water, feeding him what little I had. Then, one night, as the storm raged outside, he sat up suddenly, his breathing ragged. "I remember something," he whispered, eyes wide with fear. I leaned in, gripping his wrist. "Tell me." "There were men chasing me." I ran. "But then," he winced, pressing a hand to his head. "I don't remember how I got here." Dread curled in my stomach. Men? Chasing him? This wasn't just some lost rich boy. Something terrible had happened, and I had just pulled him into my world, a world where secrets could get you killed. The next morning, I went to fetch water from the nearby stream, but as I returned, I froze. The door to my shack was open. My heart slammed into my throat. Inside, the boy was sitting up, looking pale but awake, and standing across from him was a man, dressed in black, holding a knife. A warning curled in my throat, but the boy moved first. Fast. Too fast. In a blur, he grabbed a rusted pan from my table and swung hard. The man collapsed, knocked out cold. I stared, breathing heavily. The boy met my eyes, something dangerous flickering in his gaze. "I think," he said slowly, "someone really wants me dead." We tied the unconscious man to a chair, and as I searched his pockets, my hands trembled. A phone. A name. My breath hitched as I read the message on the screen. "Find the boy. Kill on sight." Fear clawed at my throat. The boy beside me was silent, staring at the message with a clenched jaw. Then, slowly, he looked at me. I remember who I am. I waited, dread pooling in my gut. "My name is Adrian Wolf," he whispered, "and I'm the son of one of the richest men in the country." Silence hung between us. A billionaire's son. Hunted. Left for dead. And I was the only one standing between him and whoever wanted him gone. Adrian Wolf. The name alone sent a chill down my spine. I had read about the Wolves in old newspapers and overheard town gossip. They were one of the wealthiest families in the country, owners of luxury resorts, real estate empires, and businesses so powerful they practically controlled the economy. The kind of people who didn't just make money, they made decisions that shaped the world. And now their heir, their future, was lying in my bed, injured, hunted, and barely alive. I took a slow, steadying breath. You're serious? You're that Adrian Wolf? His fingers curled into the blanket draped over him. I didn't want to believe it at first, but the pieces fit. The expensive watch that was stolen from me, the men chasing me, and the name in my head, it's all real. I exhaled, my heart racing. Then why would they want you dead? You're part of their family. Adrian looked down, his jaw tightening. That's exactly why. The room was eerily silent, the fire crackling faintly in the background as Adrian stared at the floor, lost in thought. Finally, he spoke. My father changed his will before he died. He left everything to me, cutting my older brother, Liam, out of the inheritance. He wasn't happy about it. A slow, sinking feeling twisted in my stomach. You're saying your own brother is trying to have you killed? Adrian hesitated, then gave a slow nod. If I'm gone, everything reverts back to him. The company, the power, the money, everything. The weight of his words settled over me like a stone. I had spent my whole life scraping by, barely making enough to survive. And here was Adrian, being hunted because of too much money. He must think you're dead, I whispered. That's why they left you out there. Adrian's gaze darkened. Then we can't let him find out otherwise. Adrian wasn't safe here. Neither was I. I spent the night preparing for our escape, shoving what little food and supplies I had into a tattered bag. Adrian tried to stand, but his body was still weak from fever and injury. You can barely move, I muttered. His eyes flashed with frustration. I don't have a choice. If they find me here, they'll kill me. And they won't let you walk away, either. That much, I already knew. I had seen the way the man who attacked us carried himself, like someone who had done this before. People like that didn't leave witnesses. I helped Adrian to his feet, his arm draping over my shoulders for support. Do you know anywhere we can go? He took a slow breath. There's a safe house my father built years ago. It's secluded, well-stocked. If we make it there, we can figure out our next move. I nodded. We didn't have a better option. As we slipped out into the night, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were already being watched. The forest was eerily silent, the crunch of our footsteps muffled by damp leaves. Every crack of a branch, every shift of the wind had me on edge. Adrian leaned heavily against me, his breath coming in short gasps. He was in pain, but we couldn't stop. Then I heard it. Footsteps. Slow. Measured. Coming from behind us. Adrian stiffened. His grip on my arm tightened. They found us, he whispered. A bolt of fear shot through me. We had to move fast. Without another word, I pulled Adrian with me, pushing forward through the thick undergrowth. The footsteps behind us quickened. The chase had begun. We ran. Adrenaline pumped through my veins as I dragged Adrian deeper into the forest. He stumbled, his body still weak, but he didn't stop. The footsteps behind us grew louder. They weren't far. Then, a gunshot. I flinched as a bullet tore through the air, splintering a tree trunk inches from us. They're armed, Adrian hissed. I yanked him to the side, ducking behind a thick bush. My mind was racing. We couldn't outrun bullets. Adrian met my eyes, his expression hard. We have to fight. I swallowed. Fight? Against trained men? But as I heard them closing in, I knew there was no other choice. Adrian reached for the nearest thing he could use as a weapon, a jagged rock. I grabbed a thick branch, my hand slick with sweat. The first man came into view, scanning the area, gun raised. His partner was a few steps behind. Adrian tensed beside me. On my signal, I nodded, gripping the branch tighter. Then, in a blur, Adrian lunged. The rock slammed into the man's temple with a sickening crack. His body crumpled before he could fire. The second man spun, gun aiming, right at me. My heart stopped. Everything happened in an instant. The gun fired. I braced for impact, but Adrian moved first. Pain contorted his face as he stumbled back, a dark stain spreading across his side. I snapped. Before the man could fire again, I swung my branch as hard as I could. It cracked against his wrist, sending the gun flying. Then I hit him again, knocking him to the ground. Breathing heavily, I turned to Adrian. He was hurt. Badly. But his eyes burned with fury. "We need to stop running," he muttered, pressing a hand to his wound. I swallowed hard. "What do you mean?" Adrian's jaw tightened. "We take Liam down. For good?" Adrian winced as I pressed the torn cloth against his wound, my hands trembling despite my best efforts to stay calm. Blood soaked through the fabric, dark and unrelenting. "We need to stop the bleeding," I muttered, trying to keep my voice steady. His jaw clenched. "We don't have time for this." I glared at him. "You're not exactly in fighting shape, Wolf." He smirked despite the pain. "You're getting comfortable using my name now." I scowled, ignoring the heat rising to my face. "Shut up and let me help you." The moment was brief, fleeting, because no matter how much we tried to grasp some sense of normalcy, we couldn't ignore reality. We were still being hunted. I took the phone from the man we had left unconscious and scrolled through the messages. My stomach twisted as I read the most recent one. "Report back. Dead or alive. I want confirmation." It was sent just 10 minutes ago. "They'll know something's wrong," Adrian said, scanning the screen. "Liam isn't patient. If he doesn't hear back, he'll send more men." Panic flared in my chest. "Then we have to move. Fast." Adrian exhaled. "There's a way to buy time." He started typing. "Target located. Moving in. Stand by for update." I stared at him. "That'll only stall them for a little while." "That's all we need," Adrian said, shoving the phone in his pocket. "We get to the safe house, we make a plan, and we fight back." I swallowed hard. We were walking into a war. The safe house wasn't a house at all. Hidden deep in the forest, it was a reinforced underground bunker, built for emergencies. The moment we stepped inside, I realized just how serious Adrian's family was. Walls lined with weapons, encrypted laptops, emergency supplies. It was a survivalist's dream. Adrian collapsed onto a chair, wincing. "We won't have long before they catch on." I looked around. "This place is built for war." "Because my father knew war was coming," Adrian muttered. "He just didn't expect it to be against his own son." I met his gaze. "Then we make sure you win." Hours passed in tense silence. Adrian managed to patch himself up while I scoured through old files left behind. Then his phone buzzed. One new message. "Nice try, little brother. But you can't outplay me. See you soon." The blood drained from Adrian's face. "They found us," he whispered. A thunderous explosion shook the ground, sending dust and debris crashing down from the ceiling. I barely had time to react before Adrian grabbed my arm and pulled me to the floor. "They're not wasting time," he muttered. Through the surveillance monitors, I saw them, 6 armed men closing in on the bunker. "This is it," I said, gripping a knife from the weapons stash. "They want to fight? Let's give them one." Adrian grabbed a rifle. His eyes burned with fire. "For the first time in my life," he murmured, loading the gun. "I'm ready." Bullets rained down as we ducked behind the steel counter. "How many?" I asked. Adrian peered over the edge, grimacing. "Too many." Panic gnawed at me. We were outnumbered and outgunned. But then, Adrian's lips curled into a smirk. "See that switch on the wall?" he asked. I nodded. "Flip it." I lunged for it and pressed down. The bunker rumbled. Then the entire entrance caved in, crushing 2 men under a heap of rubble. I turned to Adrian, wide-eyed. He just grinned. Dad always planned for an ambush. The attack had failed, but we both knew it wasn't over. We had to strike first. "We need to get to Liam," Adrian said. "End this before he sends more." "But how?" I asked. "We don't even know where he is." A voice from the shadows made my blood run cold. "I do." I spun around, knife raised, and froze. An older man stepped into the dim light, his face scarred but familiar. Adrian's breath hitched. "Uncle Marcus?" Marcus Wolf was a ghost. Rumors said he had died years ago, in an accident. But here he was, alive. "I've been waiting for this day," he said, voice low. "Your father was a fool, Adrian. He thought money made him untouchable. He was wrong." Adrian tensed. "What do you want?" Marcus smirked. "The same thing you do. Liam dead." Marcus revealed the truth. The real reason Adrian's father changed his will. It wasn't just about inheritance. It was about power. "Your father built something," Marcus said. Something dangerous. And Liam wants to use it for himself. Adrian frowned. What are you talking about? Marcus pulled out a file. I leaned in, and my blood turned to ice. Blueprints, bank records, illegal experiments, and, at the bottom, a contract with the government. Adrian's father wasn't just rich. He was building something that could change the world, and Liam was willing to kill for it. Armed with Marcus's intel, we prepared for the final showdown. Liam wasn't just sitting in a penthouse sipping champagne. He had an army. If we were going to take him down, we had to be smart. Are you ready? I asked Adrian. He exhaled. I was born ready. Liam's estate loomed in the distance, a glass and steel fortress bathed in cold, artificial light. Armed guards patrolled the perimeter, their movements precise, calculated. This wasn't just security. This was a war zone. I crouched behind an abandoned vehicle, my heart pounding. Adrian adjusted the earpiece Marcus had given him, eyes locked on the entrance. We have to be fast, he whispered. They'll expect a full frontal attack. We're giving them something worse, a ghost infiltration. Marcus's voice crackled through the earpiece. Southwest side. Blind spot for exactly 60 seconds. Move. Now. Adrian and I exchanged a look. This was it. We sprinted across the open space, shadows swallowing us as we reached the side entrance. Adrian worked the keypad with quick fingers, bypassing Liam's security. The door clicked open. We stepped inside the belly of the beast. The hallway stretched before us, sleek, modern, and dead silent. Too silent. Adrian grabbed my wrist, pulling me to a stop. Something's wrong. Then, the overhead lights flickered. A deep voice echoed through hidden speakers. "Oh, little brother. Took you long enough." My stomach twisted. Liam knew we were here. Steel doors slammed shut behind us, locking us in. Then the walls hissed open, and men stepped out, armed to the teeth. Adrian exhaled. Figures. We had walked straight into a trap. The first gunshot shattered the silence. Adrian shoved me behind cover as bullets tore through the air. I gritted my teeth, gripping the weapon Marcus had given me. No running. No hiding. It was time to fight. Adrian moved first, fast, brutal, precise. He tackled the first man, twisting his arm until the gun clattered to the floor. A single punch sent the guy sprawling. I wasn't as skilled, but I wasn't weak either. I swung my elbow into a guard's ribs, then brought my knee up hard. He collapsed with a groan. More guards poured in. Too many. Then, Marcus's voice rang through the comms. "Hold your ground. Help is coming." Help? From who? Gunfire erupted from the opposite end of the corridor. I turned, shocked to see another group storming in, taking down Liam's men with brutal efficiency. Adrian's eyes widened. No way. The leader of the group stepped forward, lowering his weapon. A scarred face, sharp eyes. I recognized him from the files we had stolen. Xavier, Adrian muttered. Liam's former right-hand man. The one he had betrayed. Xavier smirked. Figured you could use some backup, Wolf. Let's finish this. For the first time since this started, I felt something close to hope. The doors to Liam's private office burst open. He stood at the window, back turned, swirling a glass of whiskey in his hand. You always were dramatic, Adrian, he mused, as if we hadn't just fought through his entire army. Adrian's grip tightened on his gun. And you always were a coward. Liam sighed, turning to face us. His resemblance to Adrian was eerie. The same sharp jawline, the same piercing gaze. But where Adrian's eyes burned with righteous fury, Liam's held only emptiness. You never understood, Liam said, shaking his head. Power isn't given. It's taken. Adrian raised his weapon. Then let's see if you can take it from me. Liam smiled. And then, he lunged. The fight was vicious. Adrian and Liam crashed into the desk, sending papers flying. Blow after blow, brother against brother. Years of resentment unleashed. Liam fought dirty, grabbing a letter opener, slashing at Adrian's side. Adrian grunted but didn't falter, didn't back down. With a roar, he slammed his fist into Liam's jaw, sending him sprawling against the window. Glass cracked beneath him. Liam gasped, realization dawning in his eyes. Adrian, wait. But there was no waiting. Adrian stepped forward and whispered, "This is for everything." With one final push, Liam fell. The glass shattered, and Liam Wolfe disappeared into the night. The empire he fought so hard for was gone. And Adrian? He had finally won. The morning after felt surreal. The Wolfe Empire was in ruins. The corruption Liam had buried for years was now exposed to the world. Adrian stood at the balcony of his father's old estate, staring into the sunrise. I stepped beside him. So, what now? He exhaled, the weight of everything finally settling. I rebuild. The right way? I smirked. Sounds like a lot of work. Adrian turned to me, eyes filled with something I hadn't seen before, peace. Then stay, he said softly. Help me build something worth fighting for. I looked at him, at the man who had once been lost, beaten, hunted. Now, he was Adrian Wolfe, and this was only the beginning.